So we were talking right now, up till now, mostly about our reward markers, right? Conditioning the sounds that predict reward. Well, we also have to condition the sounds that predict punishment, because our communication system has both sides of it, right? In operant conditioning, we have two forms of reinforcement and two forms of punishment, right? I'm going to talk about this a little bit today as well, the difference between, we tend to think about dog training. What's happened in the dog training world is the reward-based trainers have grabbed two of the quadrants and the traditionalists have grabbed two of the quadrants, right? And so what happens is the reward-based trainers are talking all about using positive reinforcement and negative punishment. The giving and withholding of rewards, right? Denying of reward is a form of punishment. And the traditionalists talk about negative reinforcement and positive punishment. I think it's the wrong way to look at it. We should look at it as the forms of reinforcement together and the forms of punishment together, right? So we have two ways of reinforcing behavior and we have two ways of punishing behavior. Reinforcing behavior just means the behavior is more likely to occur in the future. The behavior itself is a good thing, right? Punishment means it's stopping behavior. Whatever you did is a bad thing. There's a consequence that you don't like that happens, right? So the two forms of reinforcement, positive reinforcement, you do something and I give you something you want. Negative reinforcement, there's discomfort being applied to you or something you don't like being applied to you. You perform a behavior and it stops, right? So the traditional way that we taught sit was negative reinforcement, right? And if I teach that right, I pull up on the leash. That's uncomfortable. I don't say anything, right? I pull up on the leash. The dog's like, that's uncomfortable. I say sit, and their butt drops, and I shut it off. Now, sit is still a good thing, right? It stopped discomfort. Sit can be a good thing because it predicts something you want. Sit can also be a good thing because it stops something you didn't like. So the two forms of reinforcement are for creating behavior, and the two forms of punishment for not. Punishment could be, you did something I didn't like, I applied physical discomfort to you. I yelled at you, I yanked on the leash, any number of things that the dog doesn't like. Anything I apply to you that you don't like, positive punishment, right? I can also deny you access to something you want. That's punishment. It's like docking your pay, right? You did something I don't want, nope, you don't get this. Got to try again, right? And so that's what we call negative punishment, right? So in the early stages of training, I'm using negative punishment. I'm not really using positive punishment. So one of the things about our punishment markers too is they have to be conditioned on the job. We can condition reward markers in isolation. We cannot condition punishment markers in isolation. Meaning I can take my dog out, he's doing nothing, and say, yes, feed him, yes, feed him, yes, feed him, over and over again. You can't take your dog out and go, no, smack, no, smack, no, smack, when he's not doing anything wrong, right? You can, but he's not going to like you anymore. He's going to be really a mess, right? There are people out there that are advocating for this. They're advocating for conditioning their punishers in isolation, right? But it makes the dog super twitchy and jumpy. They don't want to be around you, and they don't have any place to put that information. So any aversive experiences have to be connected to something the dog's doing. So normally the first place I condition my punishment markers, it's with negative punishment, right? And so there's two ways of doing this. Some people will use one punishment marker for negative punishment, for withholding reward, and a separate one for positive punishment, consequences. So somebody might say wrong or for negative punishment and no for positive punishment. For instance, like I'm going to apply a consequence. I usually just use the same one and it just evolves over time. Because in the teaching phase, I'm not correcting you with positive punishment, I'm just denying you. But it's not a bad idea to have two, right? And the first one I condition is my negative punishment marker. The place I usually condition it is at the crate door. So I have the dog, and the young dog's learning to come out of the crate. And I say, wait, and I start to open the crate door, and they want to come out, and I say, nope, and close it. I start to open the crate door, they start to come out, I say, nope, close it. What do they want? They want out, they hear the sound, and I take what they want away from them, right? It's a perfect place to condition it, right? Sometimes I condition it with young dogs. I'm doing food work, and they want the food that's in my hands, and they jump up on me, right? And when they jump up on me for the food, I just say, nope, and pull it back and pull it behind my back, yeah, that kind of thing. I usually, with my young working dog puppies, don't really care if they jump on me, so I like the enthusiasm, and unless they're really obnoxious about it, I use other spots to do it. But that would be the spot that I would do it. And then as I go forward, of course, I can up the consequences as necessary, right? And later in training, if my dog does something they're not supposed to do, I say no when they do the wrong thing, I withhold reward, and then I make them do it over again, right? And then as necessary, I think, hey, you understand this, right? and I said, no, you didn't change your behavior, then no is followed with another consequence. But a smart way of doing it is to have them both separate, right? Like one sound that means wrong, you're not getting a reward, you do it over, and another sound that means positive punishment. The truth of the matter, though, is that no matter how I condition my punishment marker, once it's conditioned, it's still a correction. It's still positive punishment. It's something you apply to the dog that they don't like, right? Now, it gives them information about the consequence, just like my reward markers give the dog information about where the reward's going to be and that kind of thing and what type of reward it might be. My punishment marker will also give the dog similar information, right? So if I were to say wrong, that's a correction. My dog's like, and if my dog really cares about their reward, it may be an intense correction, right? They're like, damn it, I didn't get what I want, right? And for a very highly motivated dog, sometimes that's a bigger punishment than me giving them a light pop on the leash, right? And so the perception of the correction is from the dog's perspective, but it's still a correction, but it does give them information. And for most dogs, denying them reward in the beginning is a punishment, but it's not as intense a punishment as me giving them a physical correction. But that's going to be dog dependent, right? I think I've probably mentioned in the past some of the studies they've done on different punishers and stress levels in dogs. And there's a classic one that they did with a bunch of police dogs, right? Where they used negative punishment, withholding reward. In this case, it was the dog's Kongs or balls or whatever they used as their reward toy. Prong collars and e-collars, right? And they measured cortisol levels in the dog's bloodstream with the various punishers. And they ranked them in terms of how intensely the dogs perceived those. And the highest level of stress was with the prong collar, and the lowest level was with the e-collar. And that meant for this group of dogs, not giving them their ball when they made a mistake was more stressful than the e-collar was, right? And I'm not saying that to say that, hey, the e-collar is nicer than negative punishment, but it means the perception of the dog matters, right? Of course, there's a lot of questions there, like how sensitive is the dog and what level we're using the e-collar on. There's a whole bunch of stuff there that's a little sketchy, but the idea basically is that for a given dog, denying them a reward can be a big deal. I've experienced 3 dogs in my life that would come after you if you denied them a reward, but were fine with being physically corrected. Like, so if you went nope and took their ball away, you got one time, they'd start to get all stimulated, like, and you did it a second time, and they'd come for you, like no balls about it, like come for you to kill you. Like they were not happy about that, right? And so that's extremely rare, but it happens. And so when we're talking about value of punishment, it's a little like value of reinforcement. Depends on how much that dog cares about what I'm denying them. It also depends on the intensity of the punishment that's followed the sound in the past. So if I said no and popped you lightly on the leash, then no is a punishment that's roughly equivalent to a light pop on the leash. If I've said no and hit you at 100 on the e-collar, now no has more value. So if I've cranked up the value on a conditioned punisher, and this is one of the reasons that people will use more than one, they'll use wrong and no, or something, or whatever else sounds, is because if they've cranked up the value on one of them at a certain point, it's too big a correction for minor infractions. So that's one of the things that's really important. Your dog's past experience with your conditioned punisher has to be taken into account when I apply it to a certain type of behavior. Otherwise, I'm doling out, a lifetime prison sentence for a misdemeanor, right? And so if my dog does something small, I have to be very careful if I've amped up the value of my conditioned punisher. So I've had some circumstance where my dog did something really bad and I said no and I got him really hard. Now I can't use no anymore for small things. My dog's gonna start to go like, oh shit, that's too much, and they get worried about something, and I may get fallout from that. So there are people that actually have multiples, right? I have my really bad one that I use, like that means the emergency one, that I use very infrequently, but I couldn't use that for, like I said, sit and you downed, right? That would be a major problem if I did something like that. And so you could have multiple conditioned punishers, just like you'd have multiple conditioned reinforcers. Most people don't, just because it's more stuff to keep track of. Like now, which one am I using? What situation are we in? It takes time for the dog to gain experience with each of them. And we don't get the same number, hopefully, we don't get the same number of opportunities to condition our punishment markers as we do our reward markers. If you're saying no all that much, or you're using a conditioned punisher that much, there's some problems in what you're doing typically, right? So we don't get the same number of repetitions with them. But the dogs punishment tends to make a larger impact on the dog, so you don't need the same level of repetition so the dog